Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story. It is Thursday, and this week we've been looking at the book of Zephaniah, and as a supportive passage today, we're reading Psalm 69. I want to drill down on verse 9 here. It says, "Passion for your house has consumed me, and the insults of those who insult you have fallen on me." So there's two pieces to this. He says, I'm passionate about your house. At least the way I read it, and the result of that is I'm taking some of the brunt of the attacks on the Lord. That's kind of the way I read it. So, what are some of the costs associated with being in love with the Lord and His house? What are some of the costs you have experienced?
Have a staring contest.
I'll lead out with one.
Okay.
It is challenging. And I'll speak specifically about my role as pastor, to get people to be their authentic self when I'm around. They immediately, the funniest time I can think of is, I went to a birthday party. It was for kids, but it was, there were adults there. And I'd taken my grandson, who was about the same age as the kid who was having a birthday. And there were other people there who were occasional to church, not regular to church. And it was a BYOB kind of party, so some of them had brought their own beer, and they had a beer in their hand. And immediately when I came in, 3 or 4 of them put them behind their backs, like, oh crap, the preacher's here, And I saw one, like, he's backing up to the bar trying to set it down so I don't see that he's got it in his hand. And then they start making excuses about why they hadn't been to church. And I really felt bad in that environment, because they didn't feel like they could, if you want to drink the beer, like, I'm fine with it. You're not bothering me. Now, if you get drunk, I'm rolling, because I don't need more sermon illustrations. But if you want to drink the beer, that's fine. If you haven't been to church, I would love for you to be here. But for me, like, that is one of the challenges, is finding authenticity in relationships, because people feel like they think I'm spiritual. Yeah. They have to be something that they're not. So that's one of the challenges, at least for me. It's not necessarily an insult. It's just a challenge.
Well, one of the things he talks about in here is family treating you like strangers. I'm recalling a specific incident about maybe 2 years ago, so it's not been tremendously long ago, where I was at a gathering of family, many of which I had not seen in quite a few years. And when I got around to speaking to this particular one, he just goes straight into this thing about, oh, here's the preacher, and you're famous now, and you're obviously making a lot of money, and just all these insults related to serving God and passion of church and stuff. And I honestly, I wasn't prepared for it. I just thought it would be as simple as, hey, how are you? Hadn't seen you in a long time. What's going on with your family stuff? Instead, it was just this tirade of just insults that just fell out, and I really wasn't prepared for it, so I really didn't know how to respond to it, other than just to think, well, there was a word I did want to call him, but I didn't. That was another podcast we did.
Hockey?
well, different version maybe, but
hockey head.
But so that would be an example that comes to mind. Yeah. And it was all just because you trying to do right and serve the Lord, and
you're associated with the house.
Yeah, be a part of the kingdom.
I'm going to take this in a little bit different direction. I think passion for your house. When we were in Israel, there was a sign, and I wish I could find the quote, but I Googled it, and I don't know what to Google. It was that the presence of the Lord will never leave the Temple Mount. And it was by a rabbi and some midrash, and that the presence of the Lord literally is in the temple, is what that is saying. And so when I think of this, first I was thinking about the church and things like that, and then I was like, wait a minute, they're not talking necessarily about the temple, because if this was written by David, there wasn't a temple yet, but they were talking about the presence of God more than any physical thing, and more than working for a church, that the passion for being in the presence of God has consumed
Mm-hmm.
David or whoever is, reciting the psalm. So as we were in Israel, the steps going up to the temple were in a really weird pattern. And so that you could walk fast up them. You could walk at a normal speed up the stairs, because it was like 2 steps on one stair, then one, and it was just kind of weird. But then going down, you can't go down those stairs fast. You can't leave the presence of God fast. You wanted to get to the presence of God fast, but then once you were there, you didn't want to leave it. And I think of that it makes it's a time consuming thing to want to be in the presence of God. It takes up time. That's what I think of when I think of the passion for God consuming me, is that there are times when I could be doing other things, when I could be in an evening with families, and instead I'm here on a Wednesday night, helping run a Bible study so we can get the word of God out. So that's what I think of. I think mainly of the time that it takes and consumes to be in the presence of God and to help others experience the presence of God.
And are there insults or pain that comes along with that?
Yes.
Like,
Sometimes you because of that choice and decision and commitment to the house of God or the things of God, you may very well miss out on other opportunities to be with friends or family where there's a choice and decision to be made. It's either I'm committed to this, or either I choose to do this. And some people don't understand that, or because you make those commitments and choices to do what you think is the right thing. Some people don't understand it, or even if they perhaps do understand it, may speak, about it in a negative or condescending way. And the thing that I find too, sometimes the price to be paid is just the mere perception of people that if you make a mistake or have a failure or sin, all of a sudden it becomes like a taunt because, oh, well, you're supposed to be all this. And that's a heavy price to pay. It's like when you are a committed follower of Christ, the margin of error for you, most people give you none.
mm-hmm.
Whereas they have and expect great latitude in that. And so that often is a price to be paid.
When I read this, and maybe I'm reading this wrong, it's almost like the people who, it's not necessarily that they're mocking that person directly, but the person loves God so much that when that person is mocking God, they are taking it as they're mocking. I don't know. Is that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I think that is the context where it literally is an overflow.
It's an insult to God.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a cascade down onto the individual.
The most current example, a few weeks back, I mentioned on a podcast that I've started doing these reels every day. So I do reels every day on Instagram and Facebook. And occasionally one will take off and get a few thousand views. And without fail, the ones that get a few thousand views draw in some trolls, And if you don't, a troll is just somebody who's just looking to say something bad about something that they disagree with. And recently, I believe we had one come in on a church post. And occasionally we'll get one. And it's usually something around how simple-minded you have to be, or how mindless you have to be able to follow something that doesn't exist. Just basically, negating, God or Jesus. And those are difficult. I think that even some of the personal insults that I think come because you have to pay a price. Because I do think you're right. To be in the presence of God requires work. It's not achieved. I heard a recent clip somewhere, and I'm trying to remember exactly how they said it, but it was talking about how we experience the presence or the glory of the Lord, that there was a difference, between just coming to his house and experiencing his presence. It does require work. And what in those moments, the insults that I feel the most are typically from people who don't want to do the work. They either feel convicted because me or somebody else is doing the work, and they're saying something to try. Oh, you think you're better than everybody else. Who are you holier than thou now? You're a holy roller, or something along those lines. And for me, honestly, the ones that hurt the most are from people who should be striving to experience the presence of God, not from somebody who is a agnostic or an atheist,
Right.
Doesn't believe in God. Those people have made a choice. It's the people who they're in that space where they say they've chosen Jesus, but they're not choosing to be in his presence. And those hurt the most. And do you believe the insults he's speaking of here are from people who don't believe in God, or they are, or have been believers, and they're just throwing stones at the expectations or requirements of God?
Well, he says in verse 8, even my own brothers. Now, whether he's referring to actual kinfolk or if he's talking about fellow believers. And so I think the application could be to either or to both, could be included in there.
I don't think there were many atheists in the Bible. I can't think of a single one who was like, there are no gods. Now, there were people who believed in different gods, but so I think most likely it's people who should believe in God, other Israelites, other people who he would be around. I can't imagine that there would be a ton of foreigners directly interacting with King David on a regular basis.
In general, I believe that's true today. But at least in media circles, they want to make us believe that there is this rise of atheism, not nuns or nuns, that they don't have any God or no religion. Some of those people they call nuns they consider to be spiritual.
Like, why are you talking about nuns? Why are you talking about Catholic nuns?
Yeah, and I think they call them nuns, right?
I hadn't heard that, but I can see that.
Where they don't have a religion, but they consider themselves to be spiritual. Do you believe there are very many atheists today, like true atheists?
I feel like more people are agnostic, even if they wouldn't label themselves that way. It is very hard to have a coherent atheistic worldview.
Nearly impossible.
Right.
Yeah, because there is for years he's been a self-proclaimed atheist that I listen to his podcast on a fairly regular basis. Extremely smart, and many of the world pieces we kind of see the same way. But recently I heard him do a podcast where he says I might be better described as an agnostic because in his brilliance, like he's a neuroscientist, he says there is, and he was interviewing another scientist that was highly regarded. They both were speaking to the fact that it's nearly impossible to look at the world and not understand there's some kind of divine design happening, And so I think I would agree. It's very difficult to hold a atheistic worldview. I don't even know that science supports it, in general. And so I would agree with that. They were and the insults are the worst insults are from brothers and sisters, particularly in the Lord.
Yeah.
Who we expect to treat us differently. Well, thank you for joining us today on this edition of One Single Story. I hope you'll be back tomorrow as we can finish up our conversation around the book of Zephaniah.